Yeah, I'm turning on the news and I'm seeing all this bullshit. Conservative and liberal are yapping all that useless. Even most you leftists are spewing your excuses, talking all that noise. North Korea acting ruthless, imagining scenarios. Oh, they gon' nuke us. The truth is you got no context to your rumors. Backward positioning of who is the aggressor.
Isn't it great when people get on? It gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling.
They will be met with fire and fury.
The US and North Korea just struggle to be friends, but why?
Number one, they are total opposites. The US is a wealthy capitalist democracy,
Whereas North Korea is an impoverished, totalitarian one-party state. They fought a war in the 50s that has never officially ended.
nukes. North Korea keep threatening to use them and the US want them gone.
Human rights. No US president has ever agreed to meet up until they do something about them. And then last week, this happened. Ahead of the official summit, I've come to a Singaporean restaurant to hold one of my own. The American delegation is Professor Thomas Gift, political science lecturer, political activist Ashley Florestal, and digital marketer whose parents are from Korea, Peter Kim. They're joined by Sung Choel Choi, who fled North Korea and now lives in London. The only person who supports the North Korean regime is Harpal Brar from the Communist Party of Great Britain.
I'd like to find out what you hope to gain from this summit.
What we would hope for is a reduction of their nuclear arsenal.
They will not agree to denuclearization unless it is not only verifiable, but it's also non-discriminatory. And at the very least, American troops have to be taken out of the Korean Peninsula. They've got no business to be there.
Would you guys be happy with that?
I think it would be hard to justify leaving South Korea, essentially our ally, kind of unguarded.
It's up to the Koreans to sort out their differences. If I'm fighting with my wife, I don't think my neighbors have a right to come and start saying, oh, I'll sort it out.
You know, you're absolutely right, but if your wife has a nuclear weapon, then it does kind of shift the balance of power a little bit.
North Korea lives as a beleaguered state. It's, you know, you talk of North Koreans having over 1 million troops. Well, they're in their own country. It's not the numbers. United States has the technology from the air, from the sea, from everywhere to bomb literally every country into obliteration. North Korea has no intention of striking at the United States. It knows it'll be obliterated if it did. But the United States has to know there's a price for nuking North Korea.
What would you guys be happy for America to compromise on?
I think the provision of aid to North Korea, as well as the lifting of sanctions, are probably the two key precepts that would be on the table. The problem is it's hard to see North Korea seeing that as a good deal.
Choi, if sanctions were lifted in North Korea, a place where you've lived, do you think that it would directly benefit the people of North Korea, or would the regime that's in place prevent that from happening?
Both sides, because government and then people, I think, will get benefits together.
I think what could happen is you have two leaders on opposite ends of the table kind of in a screaming match at each other over what should be done, and I think they've both drawn lines in the sands that are very opposite of each other.
What's in this for Donald Trump, Thomas?
A lot of it just goes to Trump's persona, that he sees himself as this disruptor-in-chief, master negotiator.
Hey, they got to the table and no one expected that, so maybe they hammer out the long-term agreement right then and there.
Any conflict that the U.S. gets into, we're then going to turn and look across the pond and see and ask the UK for help. And so I think it is of vital importance to the UK, and that it doesn't get to a situation where the US is asking for troops, for money, for support, etc. I'm optimistic of opening a communication channel. I think if that is the best thing to come out of it, then I think that it's been successful.
The holy grail that the United States does not talk to the North Korean regime because it's illegitimate has been broken. There will be normal communications between the two parties.
Beyond denuclearization, as not only an American but a Korean American, one would hope that in the long term there's reunification in the card somewhere down the line.
Well, I call that a pretty successful summit. And you know what? They don't always end this way. suppose around this table you were the one with perhaps the greater sympathies for the North Korean side of things. Is that fair to say?
I think more importantly, I have sympathy with the Korean people. I would like the Korean Peninsula to be free of foreign occupation and leave the two parts of Korea to sort out their differences with each other. I do not want a war on the Korean Peninsula. It will be extremely destructive both for the North and the South, and I'm sure North Korean leadership understands it, as does the South Korean leadership.
What do you think the chances are of some kind of resolution, between these two parties when we see North Korea in the past make promises and fail to meet those promises?
I have to slightly disagree with you. North Korea has never made a promise that it did not deliver on. Promises were made to North Korea during the Clinton administration. They reneged on it, and that's why they started on the track of developing nuclear weapons. I think the decision is entirely up to the United States. If the United States is willing to leave the Korean Peninsula on its own, to sort out its own problems, after all, the war ended in '53, and the American troops are still there. What are they doing there? There's no war going on. The war only takes place because there are provocations constantly on the North Korea, because South Korea border, which keeps the North Koreans on tenterhooks and the South Koreans. The Korean people do not want this tension, and it can only be removed by removing the biggest cause of it. That's the United States presence in that area.
But the war hasn't officially ended. You have a nuclear power with over 1 million troops on one side of the border. It's quite understandable, isn't it, that South Korea wants to bring in powerful allies to protect itself?
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. First, you force North Korea into a position where it develops nuclear weapons. Now, the possession of nuclear weapons becomes a raison d'etre for the treatment of American troops. The Koreans, as well as the Chinese, have wanted, ever since the end of the war, that armistice should be turned into a peace treaty. And the only country that was opposed to peace treaty is the United States. And therefore, the United States has to make up its mind whether it wants domination or peace. If it wants domination, it won't succeed. If it wants peace, it will definitely succeed, because the Korean people want peace. And I don't just say the people in the north of the part. I don't say two countries. There are two parts of Korea forcibly divided at the end of the Second World War, although they were on the winning side of the war. Why should they be divided? They should have been the people who should have been left to sort out their own affairs. They're not. So it's up to the United States of America whether it wants peace or domination. It's not the era of domination. Gone are the days when you could rule countries for 200 years as colonies. This is not going to take place.
I mean, Harpal, what Thomas is saying there, there's a history of non-compliance, if you like, of a failure to come to the table, to make concessions. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't. I mean, this is a mere assertion, and it can be. It cannot be proven that North Korea ever reneged on any of the promises that it made. North Korea lives as a beleaguered state. It's, you talk of North Koreans having over 1 million troops. Well, they're in their own country. They're not invading anybody. The United States has 80,000 troops, including in South Korea, Japan, Guam, Okinawa, etc. It's not the numbers. The United States has the technology from the air, from the sea, from everywhere to bomb literally every country to obliteration. So countries who do not know how to protect themselves get bombed. We've seen that in Libya, we have seen that in Iraq, we have seen everywhere. And it's no point talking of the regime in North Korea being dictatorial. I think the most dictatorial regimes are in London, in Washington, in Paris, in Berlin. They're the ones who go around invading other people and bombing them. The Korean people have invaded nobody. And if there is was a fight between the North and the South, there was a fight between the North and the South in the United States of America. You didn't say Abraham Lincoln's forces were invading a foreign country. If there was something happening between the Koreas, let them sort it out. We had our own revolution here. Cromwell's forces got rid of King Charles I. It was a civil war which was sorted out by the English people. Leave the Koreans to sort it out. Why is it our business to go around poking our nose into everybody else's trough?
But I mean, Harpal, the way you're painting North Korea is as if it's a terrible victim. So much of the damage that's happening to the people of North Korea is inflicted by the regime that's running the country.
But that's not true. The North Korean regime is one that is extremely solicitous of the welfare of its people, and the people living in the most terrible conditions of siege and sanctions actually have a very, very good life in the circumstances. I mean, go to North Korea. Don't just sit in London and repeat what everybody else has been saying about North Korea. It's a wonderful place. People are healthy, people are polite, streets are clean, there's no crime, people are looked after. Yes, there have been times.
There's huge evidence of human rights abuses.
What is the human rights abuse? To me, the most important human right is the right to employment, the right to education, the right to health. On those scores, North Korea is way above the United States of America.
South Korea wants to defend itself and to have defences in place against a state which is not open, which is has a history of human rights abuses, which is nuclear and has a standing army of over 1 million.
I'd like to take your last point first, human rights. I think we should be very hesitant to talk about human rights. We took part in the war against the Korean people, which killed 4 million Koreans. We are the ones who destroyed 20% of Korea's population and destroyed the whole of the north of the country. We should never be talking about human rights. We should really run away from this whole issue.
But we're talking about now.
Yeah, we can talk about now, but everything has got a history, and we cannot talk about now and leave everything else behind. As far as the North-South is concerned, I put it to you this way. This summit is taking place because the South Koreans and the South Korean leadership want this summit to take place. It's not because of the pressure of the United States and anybody else that this summit is taking place. President Moon Jae-in wants this conversation. North Koreans, over a very long period of time, have put forward a reunification plan. 2 systems, 1 country. South Korea can maintain its capitalist system while the North has a socialist system, but they are 1 country, just as they were represented together at the Pyongyang Winter Olympics. They can actually act as 1 country in many areas, and they can have a very peaceful relationship. It's up to the Koreans to sort out their differences. If I'm fighting with my wife, I don't think my neighbors have a right to come and start saying, oh, well, I'll sort it out.
No, you're absolutely right, but if your wife has a nuclear weapon, then it does kind of shift the balance of power a little bit, doesn't it?
The only point is that I have more nuclear weapons than my wife has, so in those circumstances, I don't think it makes a difference. The United States is the one. I mean, North Korea, I don't know, some people have 20 nuclear weapons or 60, it doesn't matter. The United States got over 2,000. What's more, it's the only country in the world that's ever used it. So it's not a responsible nuclear power.
But if we're talking about Korea sorting out its own problems, then if we're talking the balance of power does shift there. 1 party has nuclear weapons and has threatened to use them repeatedly.
Not against South Korea. Not against South Korea. They know their country. They do not want to destroy their people. They've told the United States, if you will use nuclear weapons against us, we will strike back. North Korea has no intention of striking at the United States. It knows it will be obliterated if it did. But the United States has to know there's a price for nuking North Korea. If there was no price, they would have done that by now, like they've done to Gaddafi in Libya, like they've done to Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And they go around regime change in the name of democracy and human rights and destroy whole countries and leave a wreckage behind. And North Koreans understand that.
We're talking about negotiation again, which involves compromise. North Korea has put some pretty big lines in the sand. Which of those would you be prepared? Do you think they should compromise on?
I would not advise the North Korean government. They're very wise. They will advise themselves. But personally, my own hunches, they will not agree to denuclearization unless it is not only verifiable, but it's also non-discriminatory. Denuclearization is not surrendering of the North Korean nuclear arsenal. It's also what the other side is going to do in return for it. And at the very least, American troops have to be taken out of the Korean Peninsula. They've got no business to be there. Chinese don't want that. Russians don't want it. North Koreans don't want it. And my own view is that the South Koreans don't want it. I cannot prove that, but I think the majority of the South Korean people are not mad. They do not want their country to become a battlefield for nuclear war. So they don't want these weapons. So it can be done, but there has to be a quid pro quo from the United States of America, what they're prepared to do.
Harpal, I'm interested to know, do you think that Kim Jong-un genuinely has the well-being of his people at heart entering these discussions?
Not only him, every leader of North Korea had the well-being of their people at heart. I do not think they work for personal glory. I do not speak for President Trump, whether he works for personal glory or not, but I leave it out. I don't really attribute these motives to either of them. I think they represent two countries. Those two countries have their interests. And the North Koreans are quite determined to protect the interests of their own country. It's only by acting that way that they've been able to survive so long. It's a country of 23 million people. It's a very small country, the size of Wales. For it actually to stand up against the biggest military machine that history has ever produced, the United States, and to survive. And the demonization, everybody calls Kim Jong-un dictator. What does this word mean? What does it actually mean? It means absolutely nothing. You know, what is a dictator? That he simply lifts his finger and everybody says yes. North Korean system does not work like that. There is the Workers' Party of Korea, there is the Korean government, there is the Korean people, every one of whom is armed. If they didn't like Kim Jong-un, you'd have a bullet put into him. They don't, because they actually admire him, because he represents the interests of the Korean people. And that's the position. He's not a dictator.
But he's not elected.
Of course he's elected. There's a different kind of election. Election is
part of
not
the family
every
dynasty.
5 years. You have elections. You make promises, but you fail to fulfill the day after you've been elected. No, that is not the way. It's an indirect democracy where people are actually connected with each other. You know, every country has its own, like the Soviet system was. Doesn't mean they were not elected.
Where everybody has to vote and everyone has to pretty much vote the same way. This is Joy comes from North Korea, has lived there as a citizen. You visited as a guest. There's a real conflict between the two descriptions of the country there.
No system works unless in the final analysis it has the acquiescence of its own people. It just is not possible to carry on year after year, decade after decade. If the North Korean regime is one of the most stable regimes in the world, it is because it's at one with its people. It actually acts in accord with the interests of its people. It's able to explain.
They have no way of expressing any other. They have no way of expressing dissent without going to jail. So there's no way of them to express an alternative viewpoint.
What alternative viewpoint would you want to do? The North Korean regime says we want full employment. Would you want to stand up and say, no, we want half the people unemployed? We want to feed our people. Would you want to say, no, we don't want to feed our people because it's my freedom to say half the population should be starving? There should be racial discrimination. There should be sex discrimination. There should be discrimination against foreign people. Now, they don't do things like that. Therefore, there's a tremendous amount of harmony, which is very difficult for us living in this society to understand. It's a completely different system, and it's not for nothing that every attempt is made to squash this little Sparta because they want to kill it. There's such a bloody good example. Cuba has done nothing against us, and yet it's subject to sanctions by the United States of America because it's such a contagious and dangerous example.
Harpal, do you think Donald Trump is the right guy to sit across the table from Kim Jong-un? What are your expectations of success or some progress in this meeting?
What somebody would have to be, because I have to actually make a preference for an American president. In my living memory, I don't know that I liked any American president, but I trusted to do the right thing by people either of his own country or other countries. But I don't actually believe there have been no preparations. We don't see, nobody tells us. There have been a lot of negotiations between the DPRK, South Korea, and the United States of America. So it's not true that there's no preparation. There have been a lot of preparations, but time will tell. We are less than 24 hours away from this historic meeting, so let's see what happens. North Koreans are very serious, and I think the credit goes to them primarily, and secondly to the South Korean leadership that this conference is taking place. They have, by their policy of being able to defend themselves, made everybody understand you cannot subdue us, you have to talk to us. They wanted to talk to the United States directly and have a peace treaty for ever since '53, and nobody's agreed to that. And now they're paying notice to them. The press has changed its notice. Every single sentence referring to Kim Jong-un does not say dictator now. Some say Marshal Kim Jong-un, some say North Korean leader. He's suddenly become extremely respectable because you guys are fantastic in image making and also in demonizing. And overnight you can turn good people into demons and demons into good people. This happens all the time. And it's North Korea with its ability to defend itself which has brought us there. And I'm very grateful for that. Well, it's really totally false to say that North Korean regime is seeking legitimacy from the international community. International community does not mean Britain, America, France, and Germany. International community is the whole world. There are over 6 billion people in the world. I have been to North Korea. I did not see a single day on which a foreign minister or a head of government was not visiting North Korea. North Koreans have relations with dozens and dozens of countries, so they're not isolated. It's really the old saying, fog in the channel, continent isolated. It's not true. North Korea is not isolated. They have relations with the People's Republic of China, with the Russian Federation, with India, with lots of countries. They have relations, African countries, Middle Eastern countries. They have relations with everybody. North Korea is not an isolated place. They have a lot of relations with. It's the United States of America which is trying to isolate them, trying to prevent them from having trade relations. They're not seeking legitimacy. They're not dictators. South Korea has been ruled by military dictators who shot their own people all the time. There are other people shooting. Palestinians are being shot on the Gaza-Israeli border. There's not much hullabaloo about it. They say, well, this is the way things happen. But the fact of the matter is North Koreans don't do things like that to their own people, shooting them dead. There's a house in my neighbor's house is on fire. I cannot be safe. The world is, I mean, it may be 10,000 miles away, but you know, with modern telecommunications and everything, we live literally as neighbors. We do not want any war on the Korean Peninsula or anywhere else. And after the shambles of the so-called G7 in Canada, we probably will start having good relations with many countries anyway, because it's not going to work out the way it was. The United States gave orders and everybody obeyed. Now the United States is telling everybody in the G7 countries to buzz off as well. So whether it's the Iran deal or the climate change or anything else.
I mean, it's right what the guys here were saying, though. This has been prompted by North Korea developing nuclear capability. Is that not giving a message to the rest of the world, you know, small countries around the world, if you really want to get listened to, if you want to get President Trump to sit down with you, you have to have nuclear weapons?
Absolutely. Under the non-proliferation treaty, the nuclear powers, the biggest ones, that is Russia and America, and following them, Britain, China, and France, agreed to denuclearize themselves as well. That's the end aim of that. They're not doing that. They're making their weapons more and more sophisticated. But you know, it's like you're an alcoholic and you're asking everybody else to sign the pledge, and people are not prepared to sign the pledge. They're saying it's ridiculous. You know, if it's good for people not to drink, you should stop drinking as well. If nuclear weapons are not providing you with security, we're a new trident. It makes no sense. Even people of the establishment are saying it makes no sense to spend 27 to 30 billion pounds on it. Who are we defending ourselves against? Who's attacking us? What Britain says, we cannot go to the conference table naked. We got to have nuclear weapons. Well, everybody thinks, why should we go to the conference table naked? Those who have the industrial know-how, technical know-how, scientific know-how, and industrial capacity to produce it, they produce it and will produce it until such time as there is universal, non-discriminatory, and very powerful nuclear disarmament, which we are very much in favor of. Well, I think this summit will prove to be the beginning of a process. The holy grail that the United States does not talk to the North Korean regime because it's illegitimate has been broken. There will be normal communications between the two parties, and it's going to take a pretty good many years before the resolution of this problem comes. But I think it's a good thing that this meeting is taking place. It doesn't matter to me who you give the credit to for this meeting. I give the credit to the North Koreans and the South Koreans, but you may have a different idea on it.
I got more in common with the people of Korea than I do with my own government. Damn right, believe it.